The next chapter here, or section in this, or the next chapter in this section, is اختلاف الأوراد باختلاف الأحوال. Basically, these different awrad, these habits and rituals that we've just discussed, and how they're applied depending on the person's given situation. So Imam Ibn Qudam, he says that the salik, which is the singular for salikin, basically the wayfarer traversing the path of the hereafter, will be one of 6 conditions. Either he's going to be abid, a worshipper, or he's going to be alim, he's going to be a scholar, he's going to be muta'allim, a student of knowledge, or he's going to be a wali, which is like an official position of governance. He's going to be muhtarif, which is a professional, and this is important because most of us are professionals, or he's going to be mustaghriqan bi mahabbatillahi azza wa jal, mashghulan bihi an ghayrihi, basically someone that is immersed in the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and is kind of overwhelmed with that from other things. So we'll talk about these 6 conditions or cases and how those awrad apply to these 6 cases here. So the first case is al-abid, which is a worshipper, and the worshipper is someone who has severed all other acts of engagement for the sake of worship, meaning they're not working much, if at all. They're not busy with other things, school or responsibilities of family and friends, but they have dedicated themselves to worship. And this person is to use the previously mentioned schedule of awrad, of the wirds. This is the awrad and nahar wal layl, these phases or times, this schedule of the day and the night is kind of designed for the abid, someone who's a worshipper. And obviously, as we covered, those things are different in nature and they have different jobs and basically duties that a person does, and the result of them is essentially the same thing. He says that the ahwal muta'abbidin, those worshippers of the past from the pious salaf, their conditions were also different. They differed in nature. So some of them would spend their time reading the Quran, and that was kind of what resonated with them. And so you would find that they would complete the Quran once in a day or twice or 3 times in a day. Then there were those that busied themselves with tasbih, making dhikr, subhanallah, etc. Then there were those that prayed in an abundant amount, and then there were those that made tawaf a great deal around the Kaaba. So if it's asked, he says, what's preferred? What is the preferred wird or the preferred action you spend most of your time doing from these various different allotted times in your schedule? He says, know without a doubt that the recitation of the Quran while standing in prayer, reflecting over what's being recited, will gather and collect all of those things together. But doing this consistently over the long term, in a long duration, this could be difficult to do. And so what's preferred or what's more virtuous, it really depends on the person's situation and condition. He says, وَمَقْصُودُ الْأَوْرَادِ تَزْكِيَةُ الْقَلْبِ. What's intended here by these awrad is to purify the heart. That's really the ultimate aim and objective of putting yourself through this rigorous schedule of worship and devotion and remembrance. Even when you're working, that you're conscious of your intention. Really the end result or the end aim and objective is to purify the heart, is to purify it from its various diseases. And so the murid here, or the person that's looking for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's going to take into account these various acts of worship and devotion and seek out the one that has the greatest impact on his heart to purify it, and that will be the thing that he spends or she spends most of her time doing. And then when they begin to feel some type of boredom or they become weary of that act, then they move on to something else and they mix it up so that they do not become bored with what they're doing. Abu Sulaiman ad-Darani, he said, إذا وجدت قلبك في القيام فلا تركع. If you find your heart while standing, then don't go into ruku'. وإذا وجدته في الركوع فلا ترفع. But if you find it while you're in ruku', then don't stand up. Right? So wherever you find your heart, wherever you're able to connect with Allah, then kind of ride it out. Stay the course until you can no longer find that and you have to move on to something else. The number 2 case is the scholar. This is very different than the servant, the abid, the worshipper. The scholar is the one that benefits the people with his knowledge, whether it's by giving fatwa, edicts, or teaching, or authoring, whether it's reminding people or mentoring them, etc. Then the awrad, this daily ritual or schedule is different than the abid, because the scholar, he needs time to read his books, he needs time to author, he needs time to benefit others, and so he will spend the majority of his time doing this. And this is the best thing that he can do, or she can do, after the performance of their obligatory prayers. And of course, what's referred to as what we're referring to when we say knowledge is basically what was referred to earlier in the text. And this type of knowledge is what will encourage people towards the hereafter, and will help people along their journey to traverse the journey to the home of the hereafter. Also, it's very important that the scholar divide his time or her time. They need to, of course, busy their time with seeking knowledge, but a full day and a full night of nothing but knowledge, the heart, the nafs is unable to be patient with that, and so they need to take that into consideration. And so he says it's preferred perhaps that you specify some times. So there's a suggested schedule here, that after Salat al-Fajr until the sun rises, you busy yourself with adhkar and the various other awrad or the other routines that have been mentioned previously. And then after the sun has risen until al-duha, you take the time to teach and to benefit others. You basically make yourself available. So the beginning of the day after Salat al-Fajr is where you're going to open the day with the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, various dua, etc. And then after that until, he says, from the sun rising till duha, that's when you make yourself available for teaching and benefiting others. If you don't have anybody to teach at that time, then you can spend that time pondering and reflecting over the knowledge that you have learned. He says that the heart is most pure after, or pure, and it's also most, the time of clarity when it's most clear is after you've completed a wird of remembrance of Allah. Before, and of course that's before you begun busying yourself with the worldly affairs. So taking that time where the mind is clear, the heart is pure, it's empty of any worries of the world, this time will help you be able to master and think clearly through the challenges and the problems that you find in the information that you have absorbed. And then kind of at the middle of the day, if you will, or after Luha until Asr time, this is a great time to author works, to read. And you should not stop doing that except if you need to eat, or you need to make wudu, refresh your purification, or if you need to pray obligatory prayers, or you need to take a nap. So you're going to spend that middle part of the day from kind of before Dhuhr all the way until Asr, busying with reading and revising and authoring, etc. He says from the Asr prayer until Isfirar al-Shams, which is when the sun begins to draw near to the horizon, close to setting, when it becomes red. This is when you have people recite to you. يقرأ عليه من تفسير, for example, or hadith. Someone comes, like your students, and they recite to you tafsir, or they recite to you hadith, or they recite to you some beneficial knowledge. And then from that time, in Isfirar, when the sun is low, until the Maghrib prayer is when you should busy yourself seeking Allah's forgiveness and remembering Him at tasbih, al-istighfar wa tasbih. Remember Allah and seek his forgiveness. So basically, to recap this and summarize, he says that the first wird, the first part of the schedule is amal al-lisan. It's the action of the tongue, and that is dhikr. The second one is amal al-qalb, al-tafkir, where you ponder. And this is an action of the heart where you ponder and reflect. The third one is amal al-ayn wal-yad, and that is the action of the eye and the hand when you're reading through your books and you're copying and making notes. The fourth one is after Asr, and this is the time to listen, when you're listening to your students, so that you can give your hand and your eye a break, because continuous reading to this extent and copying all the way until after Asr, it is very possible that it could be, it could harm the body, it could weaken the eyesight, it could tire it out, basically. As for the nighttime, so we're still talking about the scholar, and the scholar, of course, being much greater than the worshiper, so Imam Ibn Qudamah spends much more time elaborating on what the scholar should be busy with. He says, as for the night, then the best way to divide the time is the division of Imam Shafi'i, rahimahullah, and of course we have to remember that Imam Shafi'i was the great Imam of the Madhab, and this work we're looking at, the original, was Imam al-Ghazali's work, and so of course Imam al-Ghazali was a Shafi'i scholar. So here we find some traces of that here. The way that Imam al-Shafi'i divided his time at night was in thirds. The first was li-kitabat al-ilm, to write and record knowledge, if you will. The second was for prayer, and the third was for sleep. So those were the thirds that Imam al-Shafi'i used to schedule his nightly activities, or his nightly awrad. As for the summertime, as we know, the summertime, the nights are very short, the days are very long, then this might not be something sustainable. Unless, of course, you spent most of your sleep time at night. So remember, we want to get those 8 hours in. So if you're going to break your night up in the summer into thirds, you may require much more sleep during the day in order to keep up this habit at night. The third case is the student, al-muta'allim. He says that the muta'allim is the one who is studying and learning, a student of knowledge, is better and more virtuous than busying oneself with remembrance of Allah and voluntary acts of worship. The kind of ruling of the scholar, if you will, or the judgment of the student, or the ruling of the student, is that of the scholar in regards to them scheduling their day and their night. Except instead of benefiting people, they're going to be benefiting themselves. When the scholar is teaching, they are busy learning. They're jotting notes down. They're writing commentary. They're copying textbooks, etc. And they're busy with knowledge. When the scholar is busy writing, they're busy taking notes, etc. And if he was from the lay congregation, his attendance to these circles of knowledge, مجالس الذكر والعلم والوعظ أفضل من اشتغاله بالأوراد المتطوعة بها. So basically here he's saying that if you're a layman, you're not a student of knowledge, and you're not a scholar, your attendance to the circles of knowledge and the circles of the students and the scholars is more virtuous than you busying yourself during that time with other various voluntary acts of worship. Which means, like, if you see a lecture going on or a class is being presented, your imam or your teacher, your sheikh of your community is going to offer a class, or is going to sit to remind the congregation of something. It's better, even if you think, well, I'm not learning, I don't need to know anything new, I'm not interested in this material, it's better that you sit there, because this is considered majalis al-dhikr wal-ilm, right? The circles of knowledge and the circles of remembrance. And during this time, it's when the angels, they gather and surround those circles. So it's better that you sit there and are patient with what your sheikh is presenting, instead of getting up and going to pray on the side right there, or getting up to go home and enjoy the company of your family, or even getting up to perform extra prayers, etc. Give it a moment, take a minute of your life, and seek out the most virtuous things that are possible and that are presented to you. Number 4 is a wali, which is an official, like a government position, someone that's in governance or leadership, like the imam, which would be not the imam of the masjid, but the imam al-a'zam, if you will, the leader, the judge, a governor, for example, then their wird is going to be based a lot around them looking into the affairs of the Muslims, taking care of their needs, looking after, their situation, etc. And of course, that is all done in accordance with the Sharia, with the Islamic law, with its objectives and its aims, etc. You should have, if this is your position, you should have the best of intentions, most sincere. And if you are able to carry out your duties with a sincere intention and a pure heart, then this will be better for you, more virtuous and more rewarding than al-awrad al-madhkura, the various mentioned, the schedule that's been previously mentioned, because this is a type of ibadah which benefits others. The things that we mentioned before of the awrad, of the abid, the servant's schedule, is very much benefiting himself, not benefiting others. He's remembering Allah, he's reading the Quran, he's standing for prayer. But a person that is helping others, even if it's through governance and policy, through those types of channels, then this is helping others out, and this is of greater benefit. He says it's also appropriate that you spend the time, يقتصر في النهار على المكتوبات, that what you do of devotional worship in the daylight is kind of you stick with the obligations, and then you spend the night for the rest of your voluntary acts, and you should be satisfied with that during the night. Basically, you shouldn't be ditching your responsibilities as a public servant for voluntary devotional worship, but you should be fulfilling your obligations of worship and in your position. Number 5 is a professional, someone that is required to work, that needs to earn a living for himself and for others. And this is the case for most of us today. Most of us are professionals, and we have to earn a livelihood. And so he's not able to spend his time in devotional worship like prayer, recitation, adhkar. But what he should be doing is exerting himself in earning a livelihood. While doing that, he is constantly remembering Allah. And when he's able to obtain what is sufficient for him and for his family, meaning of sustenance during the day, then he can go back to following the schedule of events through the day and the night. Basically, you're going to work until you have what you need. You're going to work until you have what suffices you. And then you're going to stop, and you're going to go and you're going to dedicate your life to whatever it is that you are seeking, whether you're a servant or a scholar or a student, etc. Number 6, and this is the last one, al-mustaghriqu bi mahabbatillahi ta'ala, someone that's just totally immersed in the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَهَذَا وِرْدُهُ بَعْدِ الْمَكْتُوبَاتِ حُضُورُ الْقَلْبِ مَعَ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. He says that the schedule for this person, after they've completed their obligations, like their obligatory prayers, his wird is his present heart with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that will move him in any direction. He follows the direction in which his heart moves him. So if it is in the direction of recitation or prayer or remembrance or tafkir and thinking and pondering, then that is the wird of a person that's immensely involved in or seeking the love of Allah Azza wa Jal. He says in conclusion here that it's important that you are consistent with these awrat, that you do them on a regular basis. And this was the statement of the Prophet ﷺ, "Ahabbul amali ila Allah ta'ala," the best, the most loved actions to Allah, adwamuha wa in qal, are the most consistent, even if they are few in number. And this was the case for the Prophet ﷺ. What he did was done consistently. And that's where we will conclude. Jazakallah khair.